What does everyone call me right when I'm about to start filming? Besides that, no one calls me. Hello! Greetings, friends. Sorry for that. My name is May. I'm your token French auntie from another Mountie. Ha! That's funny because I'm Canadian. So honestly, I'm feeling much better from last video. I was feeling sick, but I was so comfortable and cozy sitting in my bed. I'm definitely going to do this from now on, unless I get a designated reading couch. Would not be a bad idea, right? So today I'm reading chapter 4 of Moby Porcelain. If you want any information, check the description below. Last video went pretty well, but I'd just like to preface that this is my second language, so I'm getting better, but I'm trying my best. I'm just using these videos to do something and also to practice my public speaking in English, because I'm really good in French, but in English, I make more sound effects than I do words. So let's get into it. Today we're reading chapter 4. If you have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, I made a playlist by now of me reading this book. It's a really good book. It's a memoir by Moby, who is like a house techno DJ that came from nothing. He lived in an abandoned factory, and there's a lot of that shit that happened. So just watch the videos. But now basically he's moved to New York. It's very interesting. It's called Hands in the Air, and I believe it's gonna be so now he's got his first DJ gig. We haven't got much into detail about it yet, but we know he's living with a bunch of a couple that's always depressed in the basement and a rich guy who has to eat his only orange. That's what we know so far. So let's see where this goes. All right, and like and subscribe, show some love. I've been having a rough week, so it's nice to just distract to thin air. Actually, technically, I'm reading to my fish Pablo, which is probably sleeping right now, and my dog Warhol, who's also everyone in my house is sleeping. I'm a vampire. I don't sleep. Don't worry about it. Let's get into it. Chapter 4, Hands in the Air. Not sure if it's going to be the same reference. Okay. Jeanette. Oh, Jeanette is his girlfriend. We haven't referenced Jeanette in a while. Jeanette is his girlfriend from the beginning. Jeanette, who goes to college and grew up riding horses. Jeanette. It's going to be a long one, just of me being blah, blah, noise effects. We'll see. I'll try to edit them out. From this point on, should be nice and smooth sailings. From this point on, smooth sailings. Jeanette and I were kneeling on the floor of her Columbia dorm room praying. We had just finished having sex. I was 24, she was 20, and we were dating. But we were trying to be good Christians and not indulge in our lust. God, we're sorry that we have sinned. Please forgive us and please help us to do your will. We prayed in unison. Through Jesus' name, amen. Janet and I had decorated her Columbia dorm room with U2 War posters and Andre Cortez pictures of Parisian street scenes. The room was tiny and only had a small single bed, which we would share, or if I was feeling monastic or claustrophobic, I'd sleep on the floor. Last night, we'd been in bed and had started kissing, but had managed to stop ourselves before we had sex. I'd gotten out of bed and laid down on the floor, reaching up to hold hands with Janet in her bed. I'm glad we didn't have sex, Moby, she said quietly in the dark. Me too, Janet. Good night. Really? Good for you guys. Then this morning, I'd gotten into bed with her after I woke up. Oh shit, then they sinned. We ended up transgressing and having sex. You sinners, y'all did bad. We're gonna get married now? After postcoital prayer for forgiveness, we lay on her bed spooning. That's what I don't get about Christians. You can do anything as long as you pray for forgiveness, then that's all good. You do boo, you boo boo, as long as you're not hurting nobody. Do you ever, okay, I'm going back. This is a quote, okay, this is them talking. Do you ever think we can be celibate? I asked, my face buried in her hair. I hope so, Mo, she said. I really want to do the right thing. As they just had sex. Did they use protection at least? See, that's what I'm more concerned about. Like, Janet wasn't allowed to have boys in her room. We were violating not only God's law, but Columbia's dorm regulations. So after I got dressed, I snuck out her dorm room window and headed for the subway. Her dorm room was protected by Columbia University security guards, but it was still on the 120th Street, so since I left her building, I was back in Harlem, the land of my birth. The homeless lined the sidewalks, layered in dirty winter clothes and surrounded by old garbage bags filled with everything they owned. I jumped a turnstile at 125th Street subway stop and walked past the emaciated crack addicts propped up against the wall, nearly dead men and women, thin as knitting needles, knobbing out and selling anything they could get their hands on. For sale on the subway platform, I saw used cigarette lighters, a 5-year-old copy of People magazine, a Pat Benatar cassette, a single shoe. I fished copies of the New York Post and the Daily News out of the garbage while I waited for the subway to read Murder City headlines. Apparently, the murder rate in 1989 was the highest in the city's history. The Post featured an article about teenagers running through Times Square and stabbing tourists with infected syringes. It all seemed normal. The emaciated crack addicts, the daily murders, the vicious feral teenagers. New York had never been clean or safe. But in 1989, it was dirtier and more dangerous than it had been in the 2 years earlier. And it was my home, and I'd never been happier. The train approached the station, announcing itself with a subtle change in air pressure. Then I could smell it, a distinctive combination of disinfectant, old concrete dust, rat poison, and dirty air. Soon I could see the small white light in the train in the distance, quickly getting bigger. Suddenly the station was filled with rushing noise and screeching brakes. I stepped back from the oncoming train. Almost every week, I'd read about someone being pushed in front of a subway. As I retreated, I tried to imagine if you died instantly when you were pushed in front of a train, or if you were trapped under the wheels, suffering while the rats stared at your death throes, trying to figure out if they were bold enough to get close and take a bite. The train doors opened and I stepped inside. The car was old and covered with graffiti, both painted on the walls and scratched into the windows. There were a few passengers on the fiberglass seats, but at 11 a.m. on a cold Tuesday morning, it wasn't crowded. I got a few stares from the people who had gotten on 14th Uptown, Dominicans and Haitians and Jamaicans in huge down jackets, looking furtively at me. They probably assumed I was a drug addict. Why else would a skinny white boy with long, stringy hair be getting on the 1/9 train at 125th Street? Nobody stared too long. That could get you killed. People got killed for their sneers or their headphones, so no one on the subway in 1989 stared at anything or anyone for more than a cautious second. The train headed south, its metal wheels loudly scraping against the tracks every time we pulled into a station. I always stood when I rode the subway, holding onto the strap or the rail, my eyes darting back and forth to make sure I was safe. There were no police on the subways, and kids routinely walked through the cars, stabbing people and stealing their watches and wallets and chains and sneakers. So I always stood, checking the doors, not making eye contact, remaining anonymous and unstabbed. I wanted to go to Vinyl Mania, so I got off at Houston Street and walked east. The snow was melting on the sidewalks, and the taxi cabs were speeding through the dirty black puddles, splashing anyone standing on a corner. The inside of Vinyl Media looked like every other DJ record store in New York. Everything was painted black. The walls were covered with metal racks holding the new hip-hop and house records, and the floor was lined with long wooden record bins holding 12-inch singles. At the back, there were store DJs with their turntables and huge disco speakers all shoved into a space of the size of a small suburban garage. The DJ record stores were never quiet. Sometimes there'd be one employee playing new hip-hop records at a deafening volume, while 5 feet away another employee was playing new dancehall records at a deafening volume, and 10 feet away yet another employee was playing new house records at an intense volume. I can't say the word defining. The best or possibly worst time to go to any DJ record store in New York City was on a Friday afternoon. That's when the store got most of the new records and when every DJ in the tri-state area went vinyl shopping in Manhattan. On Fridays, I'd walk into Vinyl Mania or Dance Tracks or Discorama and find hundreds of other DJs crowded around the store's DJ, who was loudly playing the new record. If a record was good, everybody would know within the first 30 seconds. You could feel the collective shudder of longing and excitement as all the DJs in the store leaned into the new music. Then all the DJs would throw their hands in the air, scrambling to get a copy of the new record that would make the people on their dance floors scream. I was at a disadvantage. Being white and little, the majority of other DJs were Latino or African American and tall. I'd stand at the back of the store and hope that the man playing the new records would see my little white hand, maybe dying to sell me a copy of Rez's Break for Love or Precious's Definition of a Track. Sometimes on Fridays, Real Alert or Frankie Knuckles or Junior Vasquez or one of the other New York DJ legends would be buying records. The legend would be granted a spot right next to the DJ booth. The store's DJ would play a new record, look cautiously at the legend, and if the legend gave even a sub-list of nods, everyone in the store would clamor to get the vinyl that had just been blessed. I had mastered the art of listening to 3 or 4 incredibly loud records at the same time, checking out the record bins while I figured out what my weekly investment was going to be. Buying 12-inch vinyls was expensive. I was making $800 a month and spending about $350 on that on food and rent. That left $450 for records, studio equipment, and socks. New domestic 12-inch was $5.99 and the new imported 12-inch was $9.99. All I had to do was buy 10 records, and in 5 minutes I had spent more on music than I would on food in an entire month. In buying records, I had to be selective and strategic. I wasn't just listening to the music and deciding if I liked it. I was also figuring out how the music might sound at Mars and whether it would help me keep my job. At 11:30 on a Tuesday morning at Vinyl Mania, there were only a few other DJs there, poring over the selection in the bins. I was checking out the bin for the DJ International label when I heard the hip-hop DJ playing a new record. All of the rappers had started making house tracks. That way, they could get played in hip-hop clubs as well as house clubs. This new crossover genre even had a name. Predictably, it was hip house. The Jungle Brothers had a huge hit with it, I'll House You, and even Big Daddy Kane, a hip house track. I listened to the new track. Some hip-hop records were cliched and obvious, but this one was subtle and understated. Oddly, it was built around the sample of Latino bells. I walked over to the booth and got the DJ's attention. "Hey, what's this?" I yelled. He looked at me for a moment and said, "Doug Lazy. Can I get a copy?" He said nothing, but handed me a 12-inch wrapped in plastic. I held it up, reading the text on the label. Doug Lazy let it roll. "When did this come out?" I asked. "Today." "Thanks," I said. Too white and enthusiastic, I bought a couple of other 12-inch on the Strictly Rhythm and DJ International labels. But my instincts told me that Let It Roll was one that was going to be huge. After paying for my vinyls, I walked down Carmine Street to 6th Avenue. The park at Bleeckers and Carmine was filled with dirty snow and crack addicts. Someone had been taking the slats off the parking benches and was burning them in a barrel. I kept walking. I was excited by my new vinyls, so I stopped at Vesuvio to buy a celebratory cup of coffee and a small loaf of bread. Vesuvio was a tiny bakery that had been in Soho since the 19th century. For as long as I had been going there, the same old Italian man had always been behind the counter in a white apron, smiling and dusted flour. "You want the whole wheat?" he asked me happily. "Small, please, and a black coffee." He smiled wider, wrapping my loaf in a thin piece of paper, and poured me a coffee. $2, he said. "Here you go," I said, handing him $3 and feeling like a Rockefeller. "Keep the change." "Thank you, gentlemen," he said, putting the money in the noisy metal cash register. I sat at one of the two small tables at the front, eating my bread and drinking my coffee. Soho was quiet. Most of the art galleries weren't open yet, so I looked at my records and the sun reflected from the windows of the gallery across the street. I was a sober Christian who worked in a drug-fueled nightclub. I was living in a filthy city that was being torn apart by drugs, AIDS, and gang violence. And I was sitting in a quiet Soho in reflecting sunlight, drinking coffee in an ancient bakery while a man behind the counter smiled at me. I was so happy and so lucky. I had a perfect new record to play, and a perfect little loaf of bread to eat, and I lived in a perfect city. And that's the end of chapter 4, and this makes me want to time travel and move to New York City so bad. Actually kind of reminds me living very simply. There's something so beautiful about it before things get complicated, because life can get complicated. So that was chapter 4. Chapter 5, we're going to have garbage-filled Shaftway. So stick around if you like this, and if you do, make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.
You guys are still here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and remember to like and subscribe.